for this policy forum on the future of municipal wireless, which we have subtitled the two states of Pennsylvania because of two reports that we are releasing today. One focused in depth on Wireless Philadelphia, and the other by the lead consultant to the Pittsburgh City Council on analyzing different business models that are being considered there and nationally. I'm Michael Calabrese. I direct the Wireless Future program here at New America, and I think most of you know that we've been heavily involved in the related issues of open spectrum on the one hand, trying to free up more spectrum for wireless broadband, particularly on an unlicensed basis, since unlicensed spectrum is really is the rocket fuel that makes these community networks, whether they be municipal wireless or rural wireless networks, whether they be sponsored by cities, towns, and counties, by nonprofit organizations, such as you'll hear both those flavors here. And a third flavor, not here today, of course, is commercial ISPs, the WISPs, of which there are thousands operating primarily in rural areas. And they all rely on open, unlicensed spectrum in order to bring broadband more affordably to communities nationwide. So I just wanted, that's why you'll see outside we've left out some of our material as well about the TV white space issue, because what that's all about is opening the very best spectrum, the TV band, which travels long distances, important for rural areas, and penetrates obstacles, buildings and trees, which is important everywhere, but particularly when you get into suburban and urban areas in terms of penetration. And because Wi-Fi and what these folks here all use to build out these networks every day is limited to what used to be called the junk band of spectrum, primarily at 2.4 gigahertz, which is shared by hundreds of millions of other consumer devices, dumb consumer devices, baby monitors, cordless telephones, microwave ovens, and so on. And what we really need is more low-frequency spectrum, which brings the cost of deployment down and the quality of coverage up for the sort of work that these folks are doing. I just make one note. I know in Washington, of course, everybody's abuzz about Super Tuesday, but for these issues, it was probably some good news, which is that the candidates who did the best, McCain, Clinton, and Obama, are all major supporters of this issue. John McCain, of course, initially introduced New America's proposal on the hard deadline for the DTV transition to free up TV band spectrum first through the current auction that we're having now, and he was an early supporter as well of the TV white space, which Clinton and Obama also support. McCain has also co-sponsored pending legislation that would preempt states from stopping their local jurisdictions, cities and counties, from entering into these sponsoring or subsidizing these wireless networks. And that became, in the two states of Pennsylvania, as you hear, that becomes an issue because Pennsylvania passed a law like that. It grandfathered Philadelphia, but thereby, Pennsylvania actually was saying, okay, Philadelphia will be the last, wireless city, at least as far as, direct municipal involvement goes, which has been a barrier, to certain other places, and caused, of course, a lot of ideas about how to work around that, some of which Professor Pia will discuss. So without further ado, let me introduce my colleague, Sasha Meinrath, who will moderate. Sasha's the research director of the Wireless Future program, and extremely appropriate that he should moderate, since he founded and built one of the very first community mesh wireless networks, the Champaign-Urbana Community Wireless Network, at around his where he was getting working on his PhD at the University of Illinois. Q and Sasha himself has actually been pioneers, particularly in using open source software for these networks, and has really helped create a movement on community wireless, not only across this country but even internationally. Where we've connected with friends in Austria and in other countries. So I'll turn it over to Sasha, and Congressman Doyle will be joining us a bit later.
Thanks, Mike. We're actually doing something a little different today in that we are streaming both video and sometimes audio out to a larger audience. There's another few dozen folks that are joining us virtually, and we're troubleshooting as we go because New America has never done this before. But it is an awesome opportunity to collect ideas, thoughts, have a discussion happening at the same time that we're up here talking. Hopefully you've picked up sort of a participant biographies sheet of the folks that are here. I'm going to tell you a couple things that aren't on the bios for you all to know about the folks that are presenting here. Don't worry, it's nothing too embarrassing. You've all made your payments. Let me start with John Baltic, who I've known on and off and on again. It seems that our paths keep crossing again and again. And he's been instrumental in helping pioneer alternative business models for municipal networking. And I think the most well-known one is St. Cloud, Florida. And what's also amazing about St. Cloud is they started making their data available to the general public about things like their take rates, which are how many people, what percentage of the populace was taking up the services. He's going to get into that, but it's really stunning how well that's worked out thus far. But the other thing that I want to point out is that he's doing some work up in Camden County, which apparently is about 10 or 15 miles away from Philadelphia, which is up to 60 municipalities, a network that's being proposed that might cover as much as 600 square miles, and is right next to an area where they've just passed, as you know, in Pennsylvania, an anti-municipal wireless law. And it's fascinating to see the differential. New Jersey passes a law that says, hey, we want to foster competition, including municipalities. Now you have these large-scale endeavors happening, whereas in Pennsylvania you have groups and organizations and municipalities like Pittsburgh that want to do this but aren't sure about the legal ramifications and whether they can legally do so given those state laws. So I'm very honored to have you here today, and thank you so much for coming out here. Next I want to talk about John Pia, who I first heard talk about this information that he'll talk about today at TPRC, the Telecommunications Policy and Research Conference. I believe I got that right. And was immediately inspired. I talked to you right after you gave that presentation. I was like, oh my God, this is fantastic. We want to highlight this work that you're doing. And I'm really glad that you could come down here today and do so. Rich McKinnon and I first met, I guess, 4 years ago or so, and he crashed over at my house. And we were at a conference together, and we spent, many, many hours sitting on my couch, talking till the wee hours, and then realizing we have to be up in 4 hours or something like that, just geeking out and sharing our stories. He's also an excellent chef. And let me tell you, I've been down to his place. I actually flew out to have a meal with him, as it were, for Sushi Fest, and it was a phenomenal experience. Get to know this man, not just for his ideas, but his culinary acumen as well. Aaron Kaplan, who certainly wins our prize for longest distance to present. He's coming in from Vienna, Austria today to talk with you. And he's going to talk about some stuff that's happening over there. What's amazing to me is the size, the scale, the scope of networks, community networks, that are being built right now, are fully operational right now in Europe. These are networks that are hundreds and even thousands of wireless routers covering entire metro regions like Vienna, like Berlin, like Leipzig, or even areas of a country. The Guifi.net project in Spain just won their national prize for the work that they're doing. Aaron has helped coordinate those research and development cats, herd them together so that we can actually have a shared research and development plan. He's been instrumental in pulling together folks in Europe. And the only reason why we haven't heard more about his work and the other work of many of the folks he's working with over there is that they don't have a PR and marketing budget. Like, he's it. So having him here is really remarkable, because you'll hear about some things that should blow your mind. And finally, Josh Breitbart, who I think I've known the longest, dating back to a lot of work we'd done together doing media activist work back at turn of the millennia, which I think, for us at least, inspired this notion of the need to have communications, the need to have connectivity, that we could produce media, but how do we disseminate it? And community networks are sort of that uber medium. They are print, they are video, they are audio, they are telephone, all wrapped into one. And his work has been really inspiring. He's done a tremendous amount of good projects with the People's Production House over there. And he also is the author of the fattest report we're releasing today. This one here on the Philadelphia project and some of the pros and cons of what happened there. We called this the two states of Pennsylvania as the byline because it is a fascinating thing happening there. You have a state law that, as I mentioned, makes it illegal for, or at least very difficult, I won't say illegal, it makes it excruciatingly difficult for a municipality to build their own network. And then you have Philadelphia, which is exempted, which chose not to build a municipal network. And on the other hand, you have Pittsburgh, which is exploring building a municipal network, but might not be able to legally. And these sorts of tensions are at play in this realm in a way that is both fascinating inside the United States, but also, I think, indicative of why the U.S. is stagnant in our broadband policies, in our penetration rates for broadband, in a lot of the work that we're doing in terms of connecting communities, whereas Europe is pulling ahead. And I would urge you to keep in mind sort of these alternative business models and ideas that the speakers are presenting today, because they're pointing the way towards systems that are working better than what we've heard about in Philadelphia or the fiasco in San Francisco, and won't hear about because they don't have giant marketing teams and PR folks spreading the word about this good work that they're doing. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to John Pia to talk about his great work.
Take this down.
All right, I'm John Piha. I, along with about 20 of my students, had the privilege of advising the Pittsburgh City Council on possible strategies. Although today I'm going to try and talk about some broader lessons, I hope, that apply a little beyond Pittsburgh, for possible models for a wireless metropolitan area network, or WIMAN, which is a term I'm going to use a lot. So when we began, we discussed objectives we would ideally like to achieve. Ideal is not always possible, but we would like to have ubiquitous citywide service. We would like to have rigorous competition. We would like to have some limited free services for all citizens. We would like to have no government subsidies. And we would like something that is financially sustainable. That is, over the long term, revenues will exceed costs. To understand what might be possible, we had to develop some models to estimate revenue and cost and apply those models in Pittsburgh. And I won't go into any detail about them, but they're all in the paper outside or on the Numerica website. So we looked at four particular models. The monopoly model, a citywide vertically integrated provider, which a lot of cities have chosen. Also true facilities-based competition, basically multiple citywide networks. Third, we looked at a wholesale retail split. You have one citywide wholesale provider and then competition from multiple retailers on top of that. That's also a model that various versions some cities have chosen. And open competition, which is kind of a default policy, where you have providers that go in and serve whatever, on a neighborhood-by-neighborhood basis, the neighborhoods that seem to be profitable. And for all of the above, the role of wholesaler, retailer, or vertically integrated provider could be played by anybody. It could be the city, could be a commercial provider, could be a nonprofit. There are some implications of that, but it doesn't change the basic engineering economics, which is where I'm going to start. So, beginning with what we saw on cost and revenue, well, first I should say on cost, we chose a specific Wi-Fi based architecture that is going to matter, and I'll say a little later why that matters. And we found that deployment costs far exceed annual costs. The first important conclusion, by about a factor of 3 to 1, because it takes a lot of money to roll one of these things out. Looking at revenues, we looked at a couple dozen different ways one might predict revenue, and looked at revenues that have been derived by the first cities to deploy these networks in the U.S. And I should say there aren't very many of them, which it means there's a lot of uncertainty. We're trying to extrapolate from a fairly small number of cities so far. But based on what we saw median household income and households per square mile was our best predictor of revenue. But expect a large uncertainty. That's just where the world is at the moment.
I'm sorry, can we ask questions during or after? We'll wait until
What's your
afterwards.
So here's just a few highlights of what we found. A citywide monopoly appears to be sustainable in Pittsburgh. By that I mean after 5 years of operation, our best guess is it is slightly in the black. But given the large uncertainty, it could easily have loss, which means, unfortunately, it's a fairly high risk for return. And this is a Pittsburgh result, but I suspect this is why commercial companies have not rushed across the U.S. to every city to do this. We found facilities-based competition was clearly not sustainable. There's a large capital investment and a small incremental cost per user, which an economist will tell you means that the competition doesn't fare too well. This is actually a lot like phone and cable companies, ironically. And I say ironically because people all like to say, including me, that wireless is different. In fact, some wireless may be different. So point I want to emphasize that this is with today's microcellular Wi-Fi based technology was not designed to serve entire cities. In fact, this technology came out of Carnegie Mellon work in 1993, and I was part of it. We weren't thinking of that. We would have designed it differently. So I think you may see some technologies coming down the line, or maybe lower frequencies, as Michael was talking about, that might change the economics and make this different in a few years. But this is with today's technology. Let's see, okay, a third model, our wholesale-retail split. This was very interesting. We found that it was roughly as financially sustainable as a monopoly. In other words, you can introduce retail competition without much cost. That's the good news. The bad news is that unless you put something in place, if you have a profit-seeking wholesaler, it will eventually force all of the retailers out. It can set prices to do that, and that's how it maximizes its profit. Now, some cities across the country have thought about that and have put in protections, and some of them haven't. And I think what they're going to find, and there's competition now. Profit-seeking companies like EarthLink are saying, retailers, come on out. Of course they're saying that. Few subscribers, revenues are low, come on out and share the burden of marketing costs. But I think you may find a few years down the line that that is no longer true, and there'll be some very unhappy cities if they haven't thought about this ahead of time. Finally, if providers are free to deploy in neighborhood by neighborhood basis, we find that much of the city might be left unserved, particularly the low income and sparsely populated areas. So what does that mean for a city? Well, one thing, first thing we had to say for Pittsburgh is we had all these great goals. We probably can't achieve them all. Nothing unusual about not being able to achieve all of your goals. We're going to have to make some trade-offs between them. And I suspect different cities are going to make different trade-offs. It's important. We also see that if you would like to achieve societal policy goals, somebody's going to have to exert some leverage. For example, if you want to provide, you need some incentive to serve low-income neighborhoods, to keep wholesale prices low if there's a wholesaler, to facilitate roaming if you care about that. And that may be facilitating access to light poles. That may mean being an early anchor customer from the beginning high-cost year. That may be some explicit subsidies. There are various ways to go. We also note that not all of this has to be done by city government. In fact, that's not the way Pittsburgh went. That this can, anyone in the community can contribute resources and leverage. It could be government, it could be civic foundations, could be universities, could be large companies. So I came out of this strongly believing that you'll end up with different answers for different cities. That in fact, even more basically, that there are cities where government involvement could be tremendously beneficial and cities where government should keep out of the way. Some of the best reasons I hear for substantial government involvement might be that a Y-man would reduce cost of city services, such as public safety. We looked at this. This did not work in Pittsburgh, but it's worked in some other places. A Y-man advances some other policy objective. Bringing it to the San Diego boardwalk means that tourists will spend more money there. So it's part of a broader issue. Or you care about the disparity of internet access. Some cities, there are more cost-effective ways to do that, but in some cities, the Y-man is the way to address that particular issue. Some reasons that frighten me a little bit that I hear. Government can offer services at a much lower cost than commercial providers because government is inherently efficient. I don't know about that one. And it's out there. This is a great new source of revenues to relieve our taxpayers of money, even though the commercial companies see no possibility of profit here. I don't know about that one either. So briefly where Pittsburgh ended up, we have a downtown-only Y-man at this point. I would say it's been a great success. It is financially sustainable. It is part of a much broader policy objective in Pittsburgh. That is, we're trying to revitalize our downtown. And this is just one piece of the puzzle, and it seems to be helping. We decided not at this point to go citywide for some of the reasons I've already outlined. We also have substantial involvement particularly from nonprofits and also from a university, that is me and my students. And the city has been more an orchestrator than a provider of services, which for Pittsburgh has worked pretty well, in part because we have so many resources to draw on. Not all cities will have them. And we're still trying to decide whether to go citywide or not and exploring options. So let me end with some state and federal policy implications. Because I believe the best policy will vary greatly from city to city, I think local officials and local voters ought to be the ones to decide. They understand what the local needs are. And state laws ideally would not get in the way, but as you've heard in Pennsylvania, they do. And this created some extra challenges for us as we did this work. So I hope Congress will restore the power of local governments in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to switch over now to Aaron Kaplan, who has our second presentation. And then as soon as he's done, we can turn this off and maybe bring Josh back out from.
That's fine. You're going to get blinded here. Cool. Thanks. We'll use that to Aaron's seat over here. He's using that, I think.
Yeah, he's going to use that.
Why don't you take his seat over here?
Let's see if it works. Just
Before.
So, thanks for being able to be here. Yeah, thanks. First of all, as Sasha said, there are lots of networks in Europe which are mostly built by the community and not the municipality. And I built one of them together with a few other colleagues of mine. So this network is called Funkfeuer. Here you can see us like climbing up the poles and just doing it with around 2003. At that time when we started to build it, we were really totally fascinated by the possibilities, and that was the driving force. Here you can see. We have color. Okay. You can see sometimes. You can see a map of Vienna, which is roughly 25. Whoops, my cable. So I hope it. Okay, well, black and white. It's roughly 25 kilometers in diameter, 30 kilometers in diameter. So the network is covering by now the whole city, except for the affluent areas here in the middle, because people didn't care to install it like on their own there. Yeah? So one of the deals was we really heavily involve the community. We tell people when they come to us, when they hear about the network in the media, they come to us and say, I want to be part of that. How can I join? Yeah? Whom do I need to pay to install that? Yeah? We say, okay, well, here we have regular workshops. We'll teach you how to do it. It's really simple. And in case you really need some help, there are a few people who volunteer to come to you and you can pay them something for it. But the idea is that you really build up your own node. So this is a network which is from rooftop to rooftop. It's totally meshed. We've been together with people in Berlin pushing the limits of mesh networking, because the larger the networks grow, the more problems you encounter with meshes. Problems you don't see with small meshes, like all the classical protocols in the scientific papers. They are usually simulated in software simulations, but when you build a real network with real high-frequency interferences, etc., radio interferences, you see different patterns. So we we drew from the best of all of the worlds of mesh networking. Part of that also, from Sasha's protocol, what he's been doing. He decided link state routing. And we've been just trying to really expand the limits, go see what we can do. So actually, how did it start? That's a really nice part. Funkfeuer is a German word. It stands for wireless beacon signals, the signals that you use for avionics. So it started like that. Somebody tripped over my LAN cable for my old Mac. Yeah? So I discovered there is a wireless card inside. So I said, okay, I just have to turn the city into one big wireless cloud, and then I can still use my Mac. Yeah? I really love that one. And this model is not so good as the old one, but okay. So we experimented. We did an anonymous access point, which is strangely possible in Austria with a legal hack. We have on the one side strong data protection laws. On the other hand, we have now the new data retention laws, and these only apply if you are a commercial enterprise. So we decided, okay, we want to be a non-commercial enterprise, and we don't want to keep any logging information, who is surfing what website by which IP address. And it was actually just really interesting to see how the law really fits, and it was a first case of that. So then we saw the commercial implications of that it was really, really cheap, and we thought we should do something in the developing world, as many of us thought. All PC, one laptop per child is doing the same thing now. We didn't go there, didn't happen. We have too much fiber optic cable in Vienna, so why did we build the network? Because we can. It was just a real experiment. The deal in the beginning was we wanted to experiment. Yeah? So now we have around 400 nodes. This spread over to different cities in Austria, and there are many cities in Germany, Leipzig, Berlin, etc., which have the same kind of system. And we share lots of the information and development effort. It's totally open source. You can take the source code now, today, and install it if you want. So still, how do we sustain it? That's maybe the interesting question for here. Well, first of all, we don't have high installation costs. That's pretty easy for us. The second thing is we do buy the bandwidth for everybody. We give the bandwidth for free. It's like the library access for free. We believe in that. So we needed a way to sustain these bandwidth costs and the costs for operating the core routers and for operating the whole thing. So what did we do? We were lucky to have a place right across the Vienna Internet Exchange, which is the switch where all ISPs come together. When you're there, it becomes really, really cheap to buy bandwidth. So we buy bandwidth for around 6 Mbit average now for 200 euros per month for the whole network. This works. People don't consume more. We would buy more if they would consume more. But this is the average. Yeah? So people really behave nicely in average. Yeah? There are spikes up to 100 Mbit. Okay. So still, for paying that, we built a co-location center because bandwidth was cheap there. Okay. With that co-location center, we can stay at market rates or a little bit below even market rates, and we just offer it almost as a commercial enterprise. But actually, what it generates is not real huge profits for a company, but just bandwidth for the network. Voila. So the whole thing is self-sustaining now. It needs some repair maintenance work from time to time, but it's not so bad. When you do proper engineering, that stays to a minimum. We're completely neutral. The network is completely neutral. We don't filter, we don't throttle at any point. And the network is owned by the users, because we convinced people into buying equipment, wireless equipment, which is, which we can flash with our open source solution. They bought it, so they own it. Voila. Just the network is owned by the association. Yeah. So Vienna is still very small compared to other networks in Europe. Gifi.net, as Sasha mentioned, is covering the whole area in Catalonia around Barcelona.
3,500 nodes now.
3,500 nodes?
Yeah.
Oh my son.
Doubling every 6
Yeah,
months.
it's doubling. Okay. So one interesting aspect was they even, I talked with Ramon and he said they even do more of what I mentioned before. They sometimes send people to install it, and they have a small business now. These people who install it, it's like installing SAT dishes for people. So they're in a few new jobs, and that's how they grow faster than us. Athens, same story. It's covering an area all across Athens, and then there's the big hidden star. It's called Check Free Net. Actually, the URL is wrong here. It's czfree.net now. And they have around 10,000 users. They're covering the whole country, and it's they grew like the internet grew. They combined local wireless ISPs into one big network. And Freifunk.net has been very good in doing research. So how much time do I still have? I think I have some more time. Yeah. So lessons that I want to share with you is include the community. I think, like you, we heard that from you already. Include the community. You can really build upon the community when they want internet access at some places where they can't get it because DSL is too expensive, because it didn't pay off for the big corporations to install that. The second part about it is we have some education aspect of it. You learn how to operate some Linux routers. If you don't want that, you can buy service for installation. The other discovery, I said that before already, was the average bandwidth usage is pretty low, but it could spike up. And also what we discovered is VoIP services are very, very crucial. They just really love VoIP services if you have a gateway to the plain old standard telephone network. I think that's how you call it. So we have a gateway where you can call out for very low rates, few cents per minute, like international calls, and they love it. So this is really something that they're looking forward to have in a mobile mesh network. Now, one lesson again compared to the Freifunk network in Berlin. They did it like that. They gave just people the routers and just said, put it up the in your window, just hang it there, and that's it. And the software will do the rest. This doesn't work, because as you said, Wi-Fi was not designed for large deployment. Yeah? So keeping the radio interference to a minimum is really key to making it work technically. Yeah? And so this brings me to a point where we highly agree on the same topic. We need more spectrum to have less interference, just to make it work. This is absolutely key. And I think we still have to have a long way to go to make this totally ubiquitous and totally integrated into all kinds of devices, so that you just turn on your iPhone and it just works out of the box. So we've been talking about how to integrate that. I think more work is needed, but yeah, thanks. I think these were my 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
For those following us online, we apologize we haven't got the decks up yet. We'll be working on that today, so you can review, but certainly something to keep in mind for when we do this the second time. That's it for our presentations that require projectors, which is great, as we can all hang out up front again. I'll turn it over now to John to talk about some of the work that he's been doing, both in Florida and also hopefully in New Jersey.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's really great to be here, and I love learning about things that are going on all around the world, because it's very interesting to see what other people do. Actually, I'm going to do a very low-tech presentation for you today because really the theme of what we like to talk about is that municipal wireless systems, they're not about technology. They're about community. Technology is just a tool, and it's a tool that just should operate in the background. I like to use the example that when people go and they turn on their TV set, they're not enthralled with how that image got there and how it traveled through the air. They want to be able to turn it on, they want to watch their show, they want to be able to turn the channel, and municipal wireless systems have to work that easily because the average user is really disinterested with all the technical mumbo-jumbo, and it's really not important. It has to work, but beyond that, they don't care how it works. So I'm going to break my 10 minutes up into 3 different areas. I'm going to talk a little about what we feel a municipal wireless means, because I think it's important to define that. I'm going to talk a little bit about the results of St. Cloud, Florida, which is one of the older systems in the country. It's been fully operational for almost 2 years now. And then I'll spend a minute or two talking about what's going on up in New Jersey. So I want to start by saying municipal wireless is a term that really has been used and abused significantly. And in my mind, if it is municipal wireless system is not involving the municipality, whether it be a local city, county, or state, or even federal government, if it is not providing a service to the citizens and enhancing their life, if it is just a euphemism for a market rate provider to come in under the umbrella of the municipality, it's not a municipal system. You wouldn't call your cell phone service a municipal system. You wouldn't call a taxi that services an entire community, say it's a municipal transportation system. It's a taxi. The bus system is the municipal transportation system. The train system is. So I think it's very important to talk about the benefits to the community, and that's really where we begin. And our company doesn't build any municipal wireless networks. What we do is work with governments around the country in helping them to identify the business models and the type of architecture they should use, and then helping them to deploy a network, but it gets done by an integrator. So that's a start. And with that, I will say that it is not a dirty word to even utilize taxpayer dollars to deploy a municipal wireless system. It's done in many places. I haven't seen many Little League ball fields that were built without tax dollars. I haven't seen many municipal golf courses. I haven't seen many football stadiums. I haven't seen many services. The needs of every community is what determines whether they're going to spend money on something. That's why there is no one-size-fits-all for municipal wireless systems, because every community is different. I think one of the people before had said that, and that's absolutely true. Each community has to define what it is their citizens want or need, what enhances their quality of life, education, and social well-being. And if that happens to be a municipal wireless system, then and the community wants to do it, then there's no reason that it's a bad word to spend taxpayer dollars if it is something that they want. So if you begin with that mentality that a municipal wireless system does not have to be something that never has any public money invested or never has any public money involved, it opens up a lot of opportunities. With that said, they do have to be sustainable, and that's the trick, is to work on business models and business plans that create sustainable systems that can benefit a community. So in talking a little bit about one of these systems, St. Cloud, Florida, which is one that began very early on, and I always like to tell people that it grew not out of technology. I mean, MRI, we are not a technology company. What we are is a company that works with municipalities on brand identity and economic development, and we were doing a large brand project for the city of St. Cloud. It's a suburb of Orlando, about 15 square miles. And we were also doing a large development project as an economic driver with a corporate park and some other things. And we began to identify wireless in 2003 as something that would be really good for the corporate park. It would be an attractor to bring businesses in there. As we began to look at it, and this was at the birth of municipal wireless, we sat, and stupid us, we didn't know any different, we said, hey, why can't you do this on a larger scale, and what benefit could it bring to a community? So that's how the idea for the St. Cloud system was birthed. It started out as an economic development project designed to enhance the quality of life and economic and social opportunities for the community, bridge the digital divide. It was not designed to make money. It never was. It was designed to be sustainable. So with that said, the city spent $3.1 million of economic development funds to deploy a municipal wireless system. They paid for it in cash. They were not looking for that money back. We identified at the time was about $600,000 a year to operate the system, and we identified dollars that the city was saving in a variety of areas that actually totaled about $850,000 just from their own internal use of the network. So now we had a network that was paid for by economic development funds. Its ongoing operational costs were actually revenue positive, but at minimum revenue neutral. So at that point, why not give it to the citizens? So St. Cloud deployed the first municipal wireless system in the United States that was 100% free to anybody that's there. It was not put out for any other reason than to create connectivity. It delivered service at a 1 megabit per second up and down, which was certainly not the fastest in the world, but it was sufficient to get people online in a way that created broadband connectivity for them. We knew early on that 66% of the citizens had internet access of one type or another, but we also knew that of them, about 25 or 30% of those people only had dial-up. So you really had more than half the community was digitally disadvantaged. They did not have either internet access or broadband services. So the system was launched, and I'm going to give you some statistics from when it was up and operating for a full year, which ended on March 5th, 2007. There were a total of 77.2% of the households in the city that were registered and using the system. That's what we call that take rate. The highest in the nation by far, the highest I've heard before, that's about 24 or 25%. Why so high? Two reasons. One, it was free, and two, there was a tremendous amount of public education and involvement that took place from day one. The city, the community was so involved and so well educated about it that when it launched, they had over 3,000 subscribers, or about 30% of the city in the first 30 days. Average number of users per household, we knew at 2.09. Average number of devices per household, 1.38. And in the first year, there were 1.3 million individual sessions. It's being used by businesses and residents alike. The citizens themselves, they estimated that they were paying $3.7 million a year for internet access. About 2/3 of those surveyed in the first year said that they were using the CyberSpot, which is what their system is called, as either their primary access or their only access. And of the people that had secondary access, 68% were going to cancel their secondary access. So what happens is that we anticipated that upwards of $3 million a year that was leaving the local economy was now recaptured and available to purchase local goods and services because people didn't have to write that $30, $40, $50 check every month. By the way, the average that people were spending previously was $36.47 per month. They were now able to put that back into the family budget and use it for other things. Now, certainly it doesn't all stay in the community, but a significant percentage does. So you start seeing a very different scenario when you create it as a true Muni wireless network, where it is designed to create opportunities for your community. And those opportunities are economic, by attracting people to move there and live there that might be telecommuters or digital commuters. It's by giving access to small businesses and people that didn't have access before, being able to look up jobs. We found tremendous number of seniors were using the system for health information, lifeline to the outside community, working with their grandchildren, a whole host of things. And also education, because it created opportunities within the education system for students to be connected. But there are many scenarios around the country. We worked with a community out in Arizona where, again, they were going to deploy a system totally free, and it was being done and funded through taxes from building houses. They get a capital improvement budget out of that. We're working with Ocean City, New Jersey, and they're going to deploy a system. They have a lot of tourism up there, and theirs will be free to the citizens, but there'll be daily fee passes to transient visitors. Between Memorial Day and Labor Day, they have the city of 16,000 people on the shore has 150,000 people a week in their city. They're going to offer it for $5 a day pass, which is really cheap, and it's going to generate actually not just the cost of the system, but actually generate millions of dollars in profit. They have a unique scenario. So again, the concept is municipal wireless creating what we would call the new dial-up baseline access at 1, 2, 3 megabits. The system in St. Cloud's 1 megabit. The systems we're looking at today are probably a 3 megabit base. But to create that universal connectivity that is an equalizer within the community and an economic driver within the community. But in order to do that, you have to have a situation where you, how am I doing on time?
Got a couple minutes.
Okay. Where you are actually creating that involvement with the community. Because what happens in a very short story, Philadelphia, we've seen it. You had a corporation who Unfortunately, their CEO died. They brought a new CEO in. They had other financial problems from other business lines. And all of a sudden, their corporate goals and needs and their legal and ethical obligations to their shareholders did not include municipal wireless. So they basically trashed their whole municipal wireless system. Philadelphia suffers, Houston suffered, San Francisco suffered because their corporate needs were divergent from the municipal needs. But the municipality had nothing to say about it. For it to be a municipal system, the municipality has to be involved in setting policies and in developing the system. Otherwise, it's just a market rate system. We're doing a project now. We're just starting up in New Jersey for Camden and Gloucester counties. These two counties got together. We're doing that in partnership with Intel. It covers 600 square miles, 60 municipalities, and over 500,000 people. And their goal is to create a regional wireless initiative that we don't have the business model done yet. We're at the very beginning of the process. But their goal that they start with is that the government and the municipalities and the citizens are going to have a say in what this is. They're going to have ownership in it. They may or may not invest money. They don't know that yet. They're certainly investing the money to do the research. But they're going to deploy it for the benefit of the citizens. It may be free. It may have a charge component to it. That's not been decided yet. But if there is a charge component, it'll be way, way low, below market rates, because their goal is to enhance the economic and the social and the educational opportunities for their citizens as a whole. But what they have defined from the beginning is that they are not going to do is they are not just going to hand it off to a private provider and say, okay, we've got a municipal wireless system. They are going to stay in control. They are not going to operate it because municipalities don't know how to operate these things, but they are going to stay in control of policies. And that, I think, the minute you move outside of that, we're no longer talking about municipal wireless. So I think that's it.
All right. Thank you so much, John. Next, we'll have Josh Breitbart talk about some of the happenings in Philadelphia right up the way.
Thank you, Sasha. Very honored to be a part of this panel, to be here to speak to you all. So I'm the author of this report, so if you've read this, you know a lot about the past of municipal wireless. And you also know that I would echo a lot of the themes that we've heard so far of community engagement being really key to the development of municipal wireless. And that I think that a lack of community engagement was one of the things that has led to the failure of Philadelphia, and that set the tone for a lot of municipal wireless, and that when we look at the future of municipal wireless, we really need to look at how to re-engage the community. One of the ways in which it was really the business model. It's not just that community engagement is nice, or that it's a progressive ideal, or that we just are Democrats or something like that, small d Democrats even. But it really was part of the business model in Philadelphia. It was really key to having people subscribe to that service, feel a sense of ownership over it, choose EarthLink over Comcast or Verizon. If there's one thing, and when I was in Philadelphia, I thought EarthLink was going to succeed simply because of the kind of resentment that there is for the incumbents there and how eager people were for a new provider. But they've managed to accomplish, managed to basically set themselves on EarthLink has set themselves on a level with Comcast and Verizon in terms of people's distaste for them in that city, and it's a real remarkable accomplishment. And frankly, at this point, if we're looking at the future of Philadelphia, I think that we see that the way forward is basically EarthLink is on the way out, and it's either going to sell it, give the company back to give the network to the city, or give it to a nonprofit. And I think in terms of selling it, it's hard to see who might be a buyer out there. I think the most likely thing is to give it to a nonprofit, and unfortunately, Wireless Philadelphia, which originally was supposed to be the manager and owner of this network, is really ill-equipped to do this service for two reasons. One, it just completely lacks the know-how. It's now set up solely for the purpose of fundraising and marketing, and has no expertise when it comes to managing the technology. So it's really ill-equipped to do that. And I think it somewhat lacks the motivation, and it certainly lacks the credibility. And I think that where Terry Phillis, the Chief Information Officer of Philadelphia, recently came out and said, that building has basically stopped, and he expects EarthLink to pull out, has really harmed his credibility and the credibility of Greg Goldman, the Chief Executive Officer of Wireless Philadelphia, because just in December they were in front of City Council saying, oh, everything's going fine, they're still building it. We don't know when they're going to finish, but they're going to finish it. And now we know that that's basically not true, and it's at most 70% complete. And when they say 70%, we don't know if that means 70% of the city is 100% done, or 100% of the city is 70% done, or it works 70% of the time. I mean, there's just there's no credibility. Nobody really, at this point, believes any of the claims that they make about it. Especially if you go back and you look at the original benchmarks. And when we talk about their digital inclusion goals, I commend the work that Wireless Philadelphia is doing, and I think that they are having a real impact on the individual families that they're helping, and they're probably enhancing the services of the organizations that they're partnering with. But the goals of the project were 50,000 subscribers. All the people who had no access to the internet were using dial-up. They were going to, have all those people, all those households, getting up to 1 megabit speeds. And if we don't know how many subscribers there are, but it's certainly not at that level. It's not having the citywide impact that they claimed they were going to have. They also said they were going to they're going to have a positive impact on all of the hundreds of local ISPs that are working in the Philadelphia area, and that clearly has not happened. So I think that the best thing, and I think what probably will happen with Philadelphia will be that they will actually give the network to a nonprofit organization other than Wireless Philadelphia. It seems to me that that's the best way out. I hope that they go that route. And from a financial perspective, it seems the easiest way for EarthLink to write it off, and the easiest thing for the city to accept. And there are a few nonprofit organizations in Philadelphia with the expertise to manage a network like that. The ideal one, I would say, is the one that joined us at an event in December in Philadelphia when we talked about this report, and that would be Philly Fight, which managed CritPath, dial-up ISP serving 10,000 people, still active, focusing on providing the benefits of internet access to people living with AIDS and HIV. It's been doing this for a very long time, has a lot of expertise. The People's Emergency Center is another organization focusing on people who are either homeless or in unstable living conditions, and connecting them through a wireless network. So I hope that that's where it happens. But the other thing that the city has to deal with right now is basically this layer of inefficient bureaucracy that has locked it into this single solution for addressing the digital divide in the city. And I think that in addressing the digital divide, it really requires holistic approaches that address a lot of different angles. And if you're tying people to one type of access, you're really limiting them in a variety of ways, even if that network actually does provide internet access, which the EarthLink network in Philadelphia does only 70% of the time. You still have to be able to support people who have different needs, whether they're satisfied going to the library, but they might need a jump drive to be able to store their research from time to time, or people who want faster access and aren't satisfied with wireless. So I think it really requires a holistic approach, and one of the problems with Wireless Philadelphia is that it's locked in to this partnership with EarthLink. I want to talk about two more things. How am I doing on time? Two more things. One, I want to talk about the work that I'm doing with an organization called People's Production House in New York City. And I also want to talk a little bit about government policies that I think could really promote the engagement of community wireless, the shift from municipal wireless back to community wireless. And I'm going to start there. And I know that we're in D.C., and when you come to D.C., you're supposed to say, oh, these are the federal policies I want. But I really leave that up to Michael and Sasha and others of you in this room. And I want to talk more about municipal policies, because that's what I think is important when it comes to municipal wireless, is what can a city government do to promote community wireless, to promote the kind of projects that that Aaron is talking about and that Rich is going to talk about. And I think they will talk about some of those things, and certainly some of what I might say has been gleaned from them. But governments should provide can provide anchor points or build infrastructure that's open and accessible to community wireless networks, whether that's providing the kind of sort of the backbone, the bandwidth that Aaron said was needed to supply this. If they provide anchor points in neighborhoods, communities can build out from there, and that's something that cities can do at relatively low cost, and then let communities take it from there. I think that one of the things that we should look at also is in terms of neighbor-to-neighbor bandwidth sharing and the restrictions on usage policies, that that's one of those things like I know this is also not something that really you should discuss a lot in federal policy circles, but like sharing of copyrighted materials, it's widely disregarded, and I think that actually we need to cultivate this as a strategy and look to particular areas of cities that are particularly distressed in terms of access to bandwidth, in terms of relaxing these usage policies, and having this be a promoted activity for the people in neighborhoods who can't afford bandwidth to be able to share that legally and safely and securely with their neighborhoods. For example, New York City has a franchising process that's supposed to be for cell phones. It's basically a failed process, but they have a 3-tiered system based on how many people, how many residential landlines there are per household in that neighborhood, and it's cheaper for people to mount antennas in the neighborhoods where there are fewer landlines. It makes sense. You promote cell phone usage and try and make it cheaper, deploy the service more there. Well, we basically should have those same kind of distressed zones where there's limited access to bandwidth for people to be sharing that. I think also cities, all levels of governments really can do more with grants and microgrants, except that there's a real need for reforming an RFP process. It's a huge barrier to entry for community organizations and community networks to go through an RFP process. It's very intimidating, it's very technical, it's very short time frame for turnaround, it's a lot of investment of work for a small chance of payout. So we need to look at ways to really get microgrants to the people who can really use them most effectively. And then improved data collection and assessment tools. Now, that is something that we're looking at the federal level. The Broadband Census Act, I think, would be great in that regard. But we also really need community-based tools that communities can use to themselves to determine their own needs and determine their own assets of what actually exists in place now. So that, again, it's not an alienated process. So that leads into People's Production House. Now how am I doing?
Now you're about time.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll get a chance to talk about that in questions. I just wanted to say that, in closing, that I think one way in which I would differ from something that Jonathan said, and this will give you a sense of what we're doing with People's Production House, is that I think it isn't enough simply to simplify it and have it so people can just turn it on and it works. It's really critical that people do understand the technology at a detailed level and that they do understand the business model and how it works, because otherwise what happens is you have this great discussion, people say, yes, we want internet access, but then when it gets down to the details, the rug gets pulled out from under them. And in terms of how quickly the technology is developing and how much of a difference there is in these different business models and different technologies, it's really important that the people who this is meant to serve understand the details of how it's going to work. And that's what we're trying to do at People's Production House, and maybe we can talk about that later. Thank you.
So with all the analysis and critiques, I thought we'd end on a high note, which is where can we look to see business models that are working at the metropolitan scale here in the United States? And for that, I bring Rich McKinnon, who's been working in Austin for a number of years, and I think hopefully you'll share some of the stats from that network, because it's really astounding what they've done down there.
Howdy, y'all, from Austin, Texas. It's great to be back in D.C. And Sasha mentioned my affinity for food, so I'm really looking forward to some fine dining while I'm here. Let me tell you a little bit about the Austin Wireless City Project. It started out of my desire to trump T-Mobile and Starbucks. Right? Austin is one of those kinds of towns that we're very proud of our local culture, our local flavor. Lots of independent coffee shops, a lot of independent bars, that type of thing. We don't think kindly of big brand name chains. Even our airport has a ban on McDonald's and Taco Bell, things like that. There are no national chains in our airport. It's all local restaurants and bars in there. So with that, I felt it would be relatively easy to kind of rally the community around the idea of local development and supporting independent businesses to help beat Starbucks. As it is, it's very difficult, as you know, for a coffee shop to compete with Starbucks across the street. Their model is to find a successful coffee shop, put a Starbucks across the street, and drive that one out of business. I was an early user of Wi-Fi back in 2000, before it really was a standard. And I saw the future with it. For me, hooking up to Wi-Fi the first time was kind of like for y'all, it was like moving from a corded telephone to the cordless telephone, right? You could do it in bed, so to speak, right? And so I was very worried about this great technology only being available for pay in Starbucks. There was two things wrong with that plan. So the idea was to help our local businesses get Wi-Fi for free to be competitive. So we looked at the possibility of creating a network, a community network of hotspots, and we could have just stopped with Wi-Fi, or we could have looked at something I think more technologically aggressive, like a mesh network, which was still in its infancy. We're going back to 2002, by the way, all right? And we made some decisions on the technology back then that were both political and financial. Let's talk about the politics. All right, we have the mission, which is to bolster independent business in Austin and preserve our local culture and make free Wi-Fi available. All right, the risks are getting shot down on the way to that path. So SBC, then SBC, now AT&T, is a Texas company, all right? And Austin is the capital of the state. And AT&T spends more money on lobbying than it does on R&D. All right, they have more lobbyists in their employment than we have politicians in the Capitol. Over 200 is their lobbying team. All right, so there was some real concern that if we did something that, forgive my Texan, pissed them off, they'd come after us, right? And they would do it legislatively. All right? And we can see that that's a real concern, as we saw in Pennsylvania, that in many ways it's better, cheaper, faster for an incumbent to drive someone out of business legislatively than to actually just compete with them. All right? So politics was a real concern. We needed to make sure that we didn't put a bullseye on our foreheads when we chose our technology. So that meant that we were probably going to focus only on public areas for providing the internet and not residential areas, right? So if you're going to provide internet to the public, it's probably the hotspot model, because realistically, while it seems sexy, it didn't seem like there'd be a whole lot of usage out on sidewalks and in city parks. We went ahead and put some hotspots out there, but really people want to use the internet where they can sit down. And so we decided to go with the hotspot model for that political reason. There's also another reason, which is financial. We didn't want to do just any kind of hotspot. We wanted a better hotspot than you could get at Starbucks, right? So it's not an anonymous open access point like you see in most places around the world. We wanted a system where there is a common or universal sign-in screen, very similar to what you might see at T-Mobile's. The difference is, even though you provide a username and an email address and some identifying information, there's no credit card involved. All right? But you still have to have a user account. Now, this type of accounting, so to speak, allowed us to build a partnership with the city and put hotspots on their network as well, because the city doesn't really like the idea of anonymous usage on their network. They have a higher standard than coffee shops, right? So that was kind of the landscape for building the Austin Wireless City Project, which is a nonprofit organization, and it's an umbrella that brings in the different stakeholders in our community. And the stakeholders are city government, transportation authority, the university segment, and also the private sector. Right now, the umbrella or our footprint is divided up about 70-30. 30% of the hotspots in our network are controlled by the public sector, and the 70% are in the private sector. And they run the gamut from coffee shops to hotels. The next part of the Achilles heel of running a successful network is in labor. Right? As a nonprofit, we wanted to make sure that we really had very little costs, and so we depended largely on labor. In order to beat the Starbucks T-Mobile footprint, they had 34 Starbucks in Austin at that time, which was 34 too many. It took us about 6 months to build 34 of our own hotspots in a managed network. When I say managed, again, remember there's this common sign-in screen, we have logging and accountability, so we can measure the success of our network. And it took about 50 volunteers that we had to recruit, retrain, and retain, train, that type of thing. It became labor intensive to send these volunteers out to fix broken hotspots, answer support via the phone and email. We quickly realized we needed to get rid of these volunteers, not because we didn't like them. We enjoyed them very much, but it's just not the way to scale an organization. So automation was the key. And what I say now is a lot of people are worried about outsourcing jobs to India. Well, we outsourced our volunteers to computers. We looked at the repetitive tasks that the volunteers did, and we figured out a way to have the computers do those tasks for them. So for example, if our system detected that a hotspot had lost its internet access at a particular venue, rather than having the volunteer go out there to find out why, we figured out what does the volunteer do there when they get there. It usually almost always involves rebooting something, unplugging something, plugging it back in. Why can't we just send those simple instructions directly to the venue itself and tell them how to do it, right? And so by very simple, commonsensical types of changes like that, we're able to get rid of almost all of our volunteers. The only people left in Austin Wireless are 3 officers. Okay, the computers run everything. As I stand here, I am the support line for Austin Wireless, right? My phone has rung twice since I've been here, and neither one of those were support calls. Okay, all right. So let's talk about the return to businesses. The idea, remember, initially was to help the businesses compete, right? So how do we measure our success there? Well, you figure if you lose a customer because you don't have Wi-Fi and the customer goes across the street, that's a loss to you. On the other hand, if you do have Wi-Fi and someone comes in your door, that's a gain to your business. And so our businesses all have value a customer differently. A coffee shop may put $5 on that visit. A hotel may put $100 on that visit. All right. So we know how many people have visited our hotspots since we've been in business. It's a little over 700,000 connections over the network, and we on average we valued about $5 a piece. So that's a little over $3 million that we've diverted back into businesses that may have gone where the customers may have gone to Starbucks, for example. Status today: we have about 100 hotspots in Austin. They are they're part of a global network. You can actually join on the same platform that the Austin Wireless City Project has, and we have 85 other cities that have hotspots that are part of this overall network the Austin Wireless City Project belongs to. The way it works is simply ordering a configured hotspot solution, and we'll send it to you in the mail, and when you plug it into the internet, it automatically joins the overall network. So that larger network is about 200 hotspots altogether. There are over 200,000 registered users of it. They've combined for 1.3 million connections. Most of the growth has been in the last year, and Austin now only accounts for about half of the traffic that comes across the network. The future. We are thinking about residential now, right? And this is why. we've noticed that the phone companies are less likely to go after you if you're helping underserved and low-income people. It's just not good PR for them, right? And so they just, even if it's illegal to do that, because if they've made a law, which it is, by the way, in Texas, it's illegal for the city government to provide residential access, and the city government is one of our partners. It's still, they don't chase after that, right? So we're looking at a way of providing some residential service to our low-income neighborhoods, because the phone company, the cable company doesn't do a very good job providing service over there. And we're looking at mesh technologies to make that happen. So that's a feature. We just had a major breakthrough this week, actually, in importing the Freifunk software that you heard about earlier. You'd think that, wow, you know, Berlin has had it for all this time. Why doesn't the rest of the world have it? Well, it's sort of like, the best way I can explain it is, have you ever sat in a lecture with a really, really brilliant professor, and he knows all the answers, and after 2 hours of lecturing, you still don't understand what he's talking about? All right? So it's in his head, but he can't explain it, he can't communicate it. So just the fact that he knows it doesn't mean it's going to help anybody, right? And so not to, you know, to diss what's going on in Berlin, they're brilliant. They figured it out, right? But they, at this point in time, have not come out with a way to clearly explain the technology. You have to have a pretty solid grasp of German, first of all. And second of all, when I brought in my German friends in America to read it, they said they still couldn't understand it, right? From the technology perspective. So it was a breakthrough to sort of bring that over here to America. I kind of see myself as sort of like the Marco Polo, right? You go over, you visit, you come back, and you go, look, I've got fireworks and pasta, right? And then you run with it, right? So, and I think, and you know, there's room for everybody. You know, you have the people that kind of invent it, and you have the people that kind of spread it, and that's kind of what my job is. Thank you very much.
Well, we have one more speaker today, and hopefully they will be showing up momentarily. There he is. Excellent. Man of the hour. As with the rest of our speakers today, I promise to give you a tidbit that isn't on his official bio. But first, let me just say that he's a 7th-term Democratic representative from the Pennsylvania 14th District, which does, in fact, include Pittsburgh. And he's also the vice chair of the House Telecommunications and Internet Committee, which is why he's very interested in these issues. And I also say that Congressman Doyle has been a champion for community media and the more efficient use of the public airwaves. And I have here a quote. I asked some folks, you know, well, what can you tell me about Congressman Doyle? And this is a great one because it deals with Spectrum, it deals with this community that he represents. This is a direct quote. When community groups, churches, and universities in the Pittsburgh area found they could get their own local voices on the air, they turned to Congressman Doyle to fight to bring them low-power FM radio, 100-watt local non-commercial radio stations. Due to his work and the tireless organizing of his incredible policy advisor, Kenneth DeGraff, who I believe is also here, right back there, almost 70 bipartisan Congress members have co-sponsored the Local Community Radio Act, which will bring real radio to every city in the country. And I would say, you know, as a champion of the local media and as somebody that really has looked and seen the future of what we can do with today's technologies, I'm honored to introduce you. So please give a warm welcome to a longtime ally for community media and connectivity, Congressman Mike Doyle.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks also to Michael and Sasha and the New America Foundation for inviting me to be with you today. I'm sorry that our schedule on the Hill is making it impossible for me to stay too long, but I want to share a little bit about Pittsburgh's wireless network and my take on the prospects in Congress around issues that the panel has raised. Now, you don't need to tell me you don't need me to tell you that the history of municipal broadband networks is a lot like the history of municipally owned electric utilities. Communities across the country demanded access to electricity, and when they were passed over by investors for more profitable areas, they decided to do it themselves. And there's been a lot of talk about EarthLink and others pulling out of projects in Philadelphia and San Francisco. What they probably haven't heard is that companies like Meraki have raised $20 million and are preparing to offer free Wi-Fi in San Francisco where EarthLink failed, and with a plan to do it for about half of what the EarthLink proposal was. So I would say that those who hear the death knell for municipal wireless networks may have driven to the wrong funeral home. They might have been premature. There might be a premature rush to install systems everywhere, but I also think we're seeing a premature declaration of death. I think reality is somewhere in the middle. Many municipal wireless, I think, has an important role to play in many of our communities across the country. And I'm really glad that one of my constituents, John Pea, is able to come down here today and share with us the results from his latest paper about my hometown and his adopted hometown, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Pittsburgh started off with big goals for its Wi-Fi deployment. But as John's paper points out, it's next to impossible to have it all on today's technology. Ubiquitous coverage, competitive access, free for citizens, and no cost to the city. Instead, municipal Wi-Fi can work when the goals are more modest, limiting coverage downtown or to specific neighborhoods, or if the city acts as an anchor tenant, hooking up city offices, police cars, power, water, and parking meters. One of Pittsburgh's biggest challenges coming out of the post-industrial era is retaining the best and brightest students that come out of Carnegie Mellon University and the University of Pittsburgh each year. Most of them love Pittsburgh for its charming neighborhoods and its vibrant social life and high quality and low cost of living. You have to forgive me a little bit for this Pittsburgh boosterism, but I feel obligated to get a plug in because it's warranted. But the problem is there aren't enough jobs in the area for all these bright kids. So Pittsburgh has to become a better business destination, as well as to allow graduates to start and incubate their own companies. By choosing a downtown-based system that gives a few hours a day of free access to anyone, and combined with other independent free networks in Shadyside and around the airport, Pittsburgh is ahead of other cities around the country. The downtown network has already drawn several thousand people to sign up, and we're drawing new conventions and meetings to downtown Pittsburgh. A lot of that has to do with the leadership from people like our city councilman Bill Peduto, from John here, and from nonprofits like the Pittsburgh Downtown Partnership and Three Rivers Connect. Of course, flexibility is the key for municipal networks of any kind. Other cities have chosen other methods, other technologies, and other ways of paying for it. Communities like Kutztown, Pennsylvania built their own fiber optic network years before local incumbents pledged to get it to them. It's especially interesting to look at cities in Pennsylvania, especially within the context of House Bill 30, which passed the Pennsylvania State Legislature and was signed into law in 2004. It gave over $100 million in subsidies and an estimated $4.2 billion in rate increases to incumbent phone companies in exchange for the promise to build out a high-speed network across their territory. A network known as FiOS to the handful of Verizon customers where they built it in my district. House Bill 30 has had its share of controversy, as Verizon had promised and gotten out of previous commitments to build a fiber network across the state. However, the biggest lightning rod against the bill was the provision that prevented cities and towns across my state from establishing their own broadband networks unless the town asked the incumbent local phone company to build them a network at a comparable speed first, regardless of the cost. For example, if a community wanted wireless, they might get told that wired DSL already had met that speed. Only after immense pressure from mayors and council members, help from lawmakers in Congress and Democrats at the Federal Communications Commission and the Federal Trade Commission did cities like Philadelphia and Pittsburgh get approval from incumbents to move forward and work with different private partners. Unfortunately, we don't know what kind of chilling effect it had on other communities without the political will to challenge the phone company in the face of a cumbersome state preemption. So we don't know how many communities will have to wait for broadband when it might have been economically feasible to take their digital futures in their own hands. So we in Congress should do something about that. I'm a co-sponsor of a bill that my friends Rick Boucher and Fred Upton introduced last year called the Community Broadband Act that would allow any community in the country to provide advanced broadband services to its citizens. Similar language was also in the franchising bill our committee debated, but ultimately did not pass before Democrats took over the majority last year. But the idea has traction on both sides of the aisle. So, what are the chances that this bill gets signed into law before President Bush steps aside? Well, I wish I could give you good news, but I have to tell you the House has already passed 2 non-controversial telecom bills earlier this year, including a bill on broadband mapping, that haven't even gotten out of the Senate. The mapping bill has the support of the business community, including broadband providers themselves. Nevertheless, I understand there's a hold on the Senate bill that prevents it from going to conference with the House bill. And now a version of the mapping bill that never went through the Senate Commerce Committee has been attached to the Senate version of the Farm Bill. It's disappointing that getting something good signed into law has been proven so challenging. The House bill, as everyone knows, had a lot of vetting and underwent substantial changes to get everybody on board, and it got a wide bipartisan margin in the House. But it bodes poorly on the chances of getting much done on these issues in this Congress. Of course, the preemption issue isn't the only issue relevant to municipal wireless networks. Business Week suggested that municipal wireless doesn't work as well as hoped because of the shortcomings of wireless technologies like Wi-Fi. That might have some degree of truth to it. As New America points out, Wi-Fi operates on frequencies that don't travel very far and have a hard time penetrating walls and trees. And Wi-Fi itself was designed for small settings like conference rooms. So seeing it deployed across expansive convention centers, on airplanes, across entire cities, is really a testament to the engineer's ability to make a whole lot out of very little. So the question is, how can we expand the benefits of unlicensed to other parts of our airways that can better pass through walls and natural impediments? Well, one idea that's got a lot of traction, and that's due in no small part to the work of the New America Foundation, is using the frequencies that local television broadcasters in a given market aren't using, sometimes called white spaces. For example, Channel 7 is used in D.C., Channel 8 in Baltimore. Could a low-powered device on Channel 8 prevent anyone in the Baltimore area from getting that channel? Doesn't seem likely. But could a lot of devices that don't properly know how to detect and back off Channel 8 driving on I-95 from D.C. to Baltimore screw up someone's TV signal? It's plausible. The reason I don't believe legislation opening white spaces to broadband devices will pass out of our committee this year is because the fight right now is at the FCC, which is conducting feasibility studies using prototype devices in labs in the field as we speak. So what should the FCC decide? Well, I'm not an engineer, so I can't tell you if these devices interfere with broadcast television signals. A lot of my constituents rely on broadcast TV as their primary source for news, information, entertainment, and sports, and the stations in Pittsburgh do a great job serving them. So I think many of us are hesitant to push for a political solution to what's really, in my mind, an engineering question. Having said that, I don't believe it's an unsolvable engineering question. I believe it's going to be solved. But regardless of how the engineers come down and what the FCC commissioners decide, many members of the Energy and Commerce Committee will be looking at the engineers' report for guidance on whether Congress needs to step in and balance everyone's desires to spur broadband deployment with our desires to protect consumers who rely on over-the-air broadcast, whether we can truly have it both ways, or if the risks to broadcasting are too great for Congress or the FCC to tolerate. Well, what are the things we can get done? I've told you everything that isn't going to happen. What might happen? Well, there's been a few accounts that Chairman Markey is working on a bill providing a national framework for wireless consumer protection, a cell phone bill of rights, so to speak. I'm hopeful that a good bill could receive the support of consumer groups as well as the wireless industry, but such a bill hasn't been introduced yet, and any speculation about what it should include would be premature. Of course, I would also point out that the calendar will be a challenge, and getting work done in a presidential election year, and one I might add when all 435 members of the House are up for election, is always difficult. But sometimes you just need to do what's right and get it done. So lastly, let me say that we in Congress need to hear the drumbeat for change from you, our constituents, on these issues. Few elected officials get elected based on their stances on these issues, so they often don't pay attention until they hear from the folks back home. But I want to assure you, contrary to public opinion, elected officials do pay careful attention to what their constituents tell them. And that's why I think we need to start to see a more grassroots effort, too, in every community, so that legislators, that this gets on their radar screen and makes it a little bit easier for people like myself and others on the committee who want to see this progress finally move out of the halls of Congress. It's a pleasure to be here today. I unfortunately have another press conference back on the Hill that if I grab a cab in about the next 5 minutes, I might get to before two senators start without me. So with that, I just want to thank you very much. Look forward to engaging you in the future. If you have any questions, feel free to get back to us, and we'd be happy to have Kenneth or myself get back to you on any questions you may have about what's going on. So thank you very much. More reading, excellent. No, thank you very much. Thank you.
So, and with that, thank you, Congressman Doyle. We'll open it up now for questions for both those that are here and the 50 or so folks that are watching this live online as we speak. So feel free to throw in a question on the chat room or raise your hand. Yes?
I have a question for Mr. Kaplan. You mentioned the voice over IP application being a killer app for your network.
Yeah.
I was just curious, how does it work? Do they have to download software? How do you actually collect, you said because you charge them for international calls, how do you collect the money from?
Yes, we have an upstream VoIP provider, and we have our own VoIP server. So they get sort of connected, so there's just a VoIP routing path there. And then we have a big table, like classical telecoms, basically. We have a big table of how much it costs to call each prefix, each country code. And then people are, at the moment, it works like that. With the 400 users or so, it's pretty easy still. We can just say, you know, you consume that amount of minutes. This would have cost you like that, you know, pay something into the common pot. You know, voila.
How do they pay? Credit card?
No, just transfer. Just normal bank transfer. They get an email saying, you know, you consume that much, please pay up. It works. It's valued by the community, so that's why it works.
So is it similar to PayPal? Familiar with PayPal?
No, just regular bank transfers.
I don't know. Can we do that here in the States?
Of course, it's a debit or a credit transaction. The
Yeah.
European banking system is set up a little differently. It's a
Yeah.
gyro-based system.
Yeah.
Any consumer can initiate a payment.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Previous career.
So we have a question also from online, which is, I think, for John Pia. Who is running the Pittsburgh downtown network at this point? And if you could use the microphones.
Who is running the system at the moment? Actually, I'd have to call and get the instantaneous report. It was arranged originally for a for-profit company, built it up with funding from Heinz Foundation and other places. That company was acquired by another company that was not so interested in this little project, and there have been lots of discussions about who might own it in the long run, and I believe those are still under debate. So I don't know quite where it's going to end up, but I think it will survive either way.
Great. Other questions in the audience? Beth?
Well, maybe this is a follow-up to that, John. I was wondering if by some stroke of political magic and magnificence the state legislature got rid of the pre-emption of municipal wireless networks in the state, how would that change what the Pittsburgh system looks like moving forward? Maybe it would change the ownership in this case.
And can folks actually just repeat the question
Okay.
into the mic?
So if Pennsylvania changed its law or removed this law that prohibits cities from a variety of activities, would that change anything going forward? It would open up the possibility of the city owning the network, which wasn't possible before. Given where we are, I'd be kind of surprised if that's how it would evolve, but it is possible. I think it could also end up under either a commercial or a nonprofit organization running it. It is self-sufficient, so it's not a big burden at this point, but somebody needs to take it on. Of course, had that law not been there a couple of years ago, it might have been a very different game.
Great. Next question from online. It looks like Mike M. How does... Oh, wait. Nope. Sorry. Specifically, content-wise, what kind of community outreach does the Austin network do?
in the beginning, when Wi-Fi wasn't well known as a connectivity option, we would host monthly, essentially club meetings for the community to come, and they'd bring their laptops and they'd learn how to get online with their laptops. We'd also bring industry speakers that were interested in talking to the community about wireless. We would also host public events, maybe like at a park when we launch a wireless park. But Austin is fairly savvy these days when it comes to wireless, and we don't spend as much time talking about it now as we just sort of use it. We've gone sort of from the sexy days of wireless to now just sort of the nuts and bolts of running a network and making sure it's run up all the time.
Great. And then in the room, I know, yes.
For Jonathan,
Yes.
I'm assuming in Florida, the town that you work in Florida, there's already some commercial provider prior to the free service. But what has been the reaction from the commercial provider after? Has there any changes in service or price or?
Yeah. That's actually kind of interesting. Yeah, there was a
Could you
cable
repeat
provider.
the question?
Yeah, asking if there was a commercial provider for internet access in St. Cloud prior to deploying the system. They had basically the entire city was covered and had access to cable through Comcast, I think, and then had Bright House. I'm sorry, and then. They had DSL lines from their local phone provider. So there were really very few portions of the city that did not have access to the internet. Interestingly enough, very early in the process, when we were holding public workshops and inviting stakeholders in, we had invited Sprint in and Bright House. I don't think Bright House came, but they didn't care. Sprint showed up at a bunch of the meetings. They didn't really have any interest, and no one ever, from any of the incumbents, ever said anything, nor did they ever change any of their policies. They just sort of ignored it. It was a small city at the time.
From online, from Mike M., how does Austin, Funkfoya, and other networks handle privacy issues?
Well, for us, it's pretty easy. The network is open, so I'll go a bit into details. Privacy and data protection, and is on the one side, and not. Encryption and data protection versus privacy. So encryption, data protection, we run an open network, so we encourage people to use VPNs because that's the best we can do, and the best solution in general would be end-to-end encryption. So we educate users to not trust their online banking unless there is really this SSL sign here and it is end-to-end encrypted. We don't want to, encrypt for them the traffic to the bank and from the bank. Technically, this is the most reasonable solution. Privacy, we are required to keep the data private anyway. It's EU law. So unless there is a written letter from a court requesting us to open up the data, we won't give it to anybody. Basta. We have to deal like that.
We used to require
Rich?
courts in the U.S. We seem to have given that up.
Very similarly to what goes on with FriFunk, when a user creates an account with us for the first time, they have to acknowledge what we call the security statement. The security statement simply reminds people that when you are using a computer at a Wi-Fi hotspot, you're on a shared network with other users, and you need to remember that there's a shared environment there, and you should have a personal firewall in place. Secondarily, when you are using Wi-Fi, often your data is being transmitted, as we call it, in the clear. It's non-encrypted, and we remind them of that, to not transmit any sensitive information over the air. So that's one piece of it, this security statement. The other piece is, because we do collect minimally identifiable information, such as a username and an email address, we have a privacy policy as well that we share with those users, and if they choose to accept that privacy policy when they register, then we've established essentially a promise to not share that information inappropriately with anybody.
And a quick follow-up from online is, are you guys retaining any user information beyond MAC address?
Yes. Address, telephone number, social, no. Address, telephone number, and email address. because we want to, for us, the network is owned by the users. So we, in case there's something really happening wrong, something wrong technically, we want to be able to send them an email and say, in that part of your area there was something wrong, or your computer has a virus, please check it.
Right. Back there?
Well, I'm particularly interested in economic development, local, regional, state. Of course, we've heard some nice examples of the stimulating effect, either actual or prospective. But cities do a lot of things in the name of, job creation, general wealth creation, government's function. Is there any kind of comparative work looking at municipal wireless relative to the other choices that local government bodies have made to stimulate their economies specifically, not just community well-being, but in general ambiance?
Could you also sum up the question before you answer?
The question was whether there is evidence that economic development comes from these sorts of networks, and I guess also comparison to other things that a city could be doing. Is that a fair characterization?
Or argument. I mean, not just examples.
Right. I have a colleague, Marvin Serbu, who has actually done a study comparing a number of cities. These are mostly smaller cities, not large ones like Pittsburgh and Philadelphia that we've discussed up here. He has found through analysis that you can see, looking at cities that deployed some economic benefit a year or two out. I think that's a useful and important thing. It does not tell you how that compares with other ways to invest the money. That's harder. It also doesn't tell you regionally whether they just took the growth away from the neighboring town. So I mean, there's issues that need to be still understood. I don't have evidence for this, but my personal guess is that there are some towns that can benefit a lot and some won't, and it will depend on what's going on in the town. But his is a regression analysis.
Yeah, let me just comment a couple of things. That's always the chicken and the egg in economic development, and it's very hard to track, obviously. But and there are a number of avenues where you can people can argue one way or the other. Did it provide a benefit or did it not, and so on. But I know that we did some statistical analysis in St. Cloud, and I'll give you one concrete example. We knew that the average household was spending $420 a year for internet access. At the time, the taxes in St. Cloud, not the school tax and the county tax, which is separate, but just the city municipal tax for the average household was about $320. The city providing this one service free of charge was putting more money back in the pockets of the average resident than they were paying for their entire city taxes for police and fire and all other city services. Putting that in perspective, at that same year, that was the first year of tax cuts, the federal tax cuts, that put an average of $300 back in the average family's budget, and the city was putting $420 back in the average family budget. So that is a very concrete number. How the people spend that money, very hard to track. But there's enough data out there that shows if you put money into the economy, as is going to happen now with an economic stimulus package, there is a cause and effect to it.
Going back to online, Wireless 728 says, the gentleman from Austria mentioned the need for more spectrum. What spectrum does their network hope to use or get access to?
As much as possible. It's really like that. What we encountered is, especially because our mesh solution is using many channels. So we use all the channels we can get on 2.4 gigahertz. That's 3 different channels. So basically you can imagine it like somebody talks over one channel, a packet comes in, and it leaves on a different channel. That means they don't interfere, okay? As soon as they would be on the same channel, they would interfere. Voila, the bandwidth drops. So we want to keep the bandwidth high. So in general, the more spectrum we can get, 700 megahertz, 800, 900, something like that, this will be an EU topic probably, yeah, when it comes. Then, we'll just try to reprogram our devices and use that. And this effectively means more bandwidth to the average user. like really in Mbits per second. And yeah.
And just to build on that, the hard politics are that in the U.S. we tend to set policy, and most of the rest of the world harmonizes on our policies. So New America Foundation's been doing a ton of work on white space devices, opening up the 700 band, which basically means reusing the unused television bands in order to provide things like broadband connectivity. Michael, do you want to add to that, or?
I was just it'd be a question building on that.
Okay, well, let me go back to the queue. Actually, I think we're in the room now. So who had their hands up before? I know there was one back here, and we'll go over here. So.
I wanted to go back to economic development. I've worked in Macedonia, Montenegro, Africa, and USAID has provided the funding for the networks that I built. But the clear emphasis was based on economic development, and coming back to the U.S., that's what I've been trying to explain to the wireless work that I do, particularly in rural areas, that you can accomplish economic growth. If only you have a case of people not having to leave rural areas to go to the city to get employment, you get to maintain their salaries in those locations. In Macedonia, we had many examples of companies outside of Macedonia relocating services within Macedonia because of price costs, and those are jobs that would not have been available otherwise. And once wireless became ubiquitous in Macedonia, that's when they started coming in, and that's my hope for America.
Thanks.
Can I just say something? And that's Glenn Strachan, is that how you pronounce his last name? Strawn, sorry. But yeah, I think that there would be a great panel on rural broadband, and Glenn would be an incredible speaker on that. But I think that some of the things that he did in Macedonia we really could learn from, because as I understand the work that he did, it built on using schools that were around the country basically as these anchor points for building out wireless networks in different regions. That's basically the strategy. But of course, the way that E-rate is structured, where our communities are legally prevented from schools are legally prevented from sharing their broadband with their communities, even though schools are only in session 15% of the time, and if you look at New York City public schools in terms of the amount of time people are actually using those computers, it's even less. So that's another way in which we could really extend the work that we're doing, especially if we focus on rural areas or particular communities where we could get a lot more out of those federal dollars we're already spending.
Yeah, let me just add one thing on talking about the connectivity. I think sometimes there is a desire for, everyone feels like we have to have all the answers and figure out every angle of how this is going to work and how that's going to affect something else and how you're going to make spur the economy exactly. And I think we have to take a step back and look at the goal of municipal wireless is really to create ubiquitous connectivity and universal access. What happens once you do that is people, hundreds of people, smarter than all of us, with that access now find ways to leverage that access to create that economic opportunity. So, the cities can't answer, and the municipalities can't answer every question that's out there before they deploy a municipal wireless system or know the answer to everything. What they can do is create the access. It's like when they built the highway system in the U.S., they didn't really know everything that was going to happen by creating connectivity of having roads and people able to drive across the country, but they knew it would have an impact. Once they created the highway system, a lot of economic opportunity revolved and around it and built up around it. So the goal is to create access as universal and as low cost as is humanly possible and let the market then take over.
I want to add to that. I just want to, enforce your argument by saying Van Jacobsen, one of the founders of the internet and the author of the PPP protocol, which was widely used in all the dial-ups, said basically the same thing, that once you have that network in place, you find lots of innovation, especially at the edges of the network. So this is really, he mentioned it's one of the biggest trends in the next 15 years of networking.
Excellent.
Go back. I can share that paper with you.
Go back to, let's see, Josue, who asks and was clearly paying attention if Josh could in fact talk a bit about People's Production House.
Thank you, Josue. Well, it's a lot of what we've talked about in terms of community engagement. What we're working on now, well, People's Production House historically has been an organization that teaches kids in public schools to make radio and teaches media literacy, and has worked with community organizations for the last few years to also create radio journalists, people reporting on their own movements. And that's how we got involved in internet policy, because it's such a good way for these for people to reach these hyper-local audiences, to distribute it not just on radio stations, but over the internet. But we saw with internet policy is that it tends to be shaped by experts, even people who have a lot of access to high-speed internet, have a lot of technological privilege, to use a phrase. Even if the policies are being designed to reach people who don't have access to the internet or don't have access to technology. So we wanted to, as I said before, figure out ways to explain not just the values of internet access, but the nuts and bolts of it. So what we're doing is developing some of these community-based assessment tools and developing teaching modules, basically ways that we can go into classrooms and teach complex things, including some of the terms that we might hear today, like, what is encryption, or what is bandwidth, what is the difference between a fiber optic connection and a wireless connection, or a hotspot versus mesh, so that when people come to advocate for and engage in the shaping of these policies, that they can really determine the future of the internet that will serve them. So that's what we're working at People's Production House. Another thing that came up online, I was looking over Sasha's shoulder, is that there are some tools that, these type of assessment tools. Drew Clark just launched broadbandcensus.com, and just wanted to mention that. And these online tools, I think we need to find a way to merge them with offline, because again, while we really want to enhance the way the internet serves the people who have internet access, there are people who don't have internet access, and obviously online-based assessment tools, we need to be able to connect online activism and offline advocacy to really forge a shared internet policy that's going to work for everybody.
And Josh, just could you give the link for People's Production House?
It's peoplesproductionhouse.org, and the program that we do there is called the Digital Expansion Initiative.
Great, thanks. So we got a question here.
Sure. I haven't heard much from the panelists about how municipalities can raise the money to build these municipal systems. And I see that several states, like Vermont, California, for example, have been proposing selling municipal bonds in order to fund their broadband initiatives. And I wonder if that's a strategy that you, and this is for any of the panelists, if that's a strategy that you recommend that cities try to look at as a way to generate the funding to build these systems.
Yeah. Certainly
Could
there'll
you
be
just repeat the question real quick?
about how do municipalities raise money to fund the capital side of building these systems. And that's very important to deal with, because we have two sides of every system, the CapEx side and the OpEx side. So on the capital side, certainly selling bonds is an option, and in certain, particularly larger deployments, might make some sense. But there really are so many different ways to do it. And I think what's important is to first look internally in the sense of where are their monies available. What we have found when we've worked with communities over and over again is they actually are spending much of this money already in other budgets. So let me give you an example. We've been into numerous communities where they're going to be deploying a new public safety network, and they're going to be spending $2 million. It's already budgeted. And it's going to give a certain amount of capacity and bandwidth for their public safety vehicles. Why can't that $2 million be rolled into a municipal wireless network that has a public side and a private side, which all of the systems do or can, so that you have the public safety involvement. So you're taking dollars that were going to be spent in the community anyway, you're usually giving them more capacity than they would have gotten had they spent the money, plus you are sharing that so you have that public side as well. Additionally, there's advertising revenues that come up, there's corporate sponsorships in various areas, there are dollars that are contributed from other departments, whether it be Parks and Recreation or other municipal service sides. So you start finding buckets of money all around government first. That's sort of the low-hanging fruit, and you put together and identify those dollars. Then you start looking at savings. So we were working out in Arizona with a community, and we found that they were spending $250,000 a year for cell phone access. Yet the majority of those people never left the city. So if they deploy their municipal wireless system utilizing VoIP phones for all their people, their $250,000 annual cost goes down to like about $20,000, where they have a bucket of shared minutes for certain phones that leave the area. So that typically goes more to the to the OpEx side, but you find all those existing dollars, and then you work backwards and figure out what you need. And a lot of times it's a lot less than you think. Then, as in like St. Cloud's case, very often there are economic development dollars available. There are, as I mentioned, there are corporate sponsorships and corporate citizens that will contribute. Some cities can string it all together like that. Other cities have to then look at other avenues. And if they are going to have a revenue stream that is reliable and reasonable and clear, then and only then maybe they would look at a bond situation, because they can document, just like you would do a toll revenue bond for a toll road or something like that. So I think what we have seen more than anything is people overlook a lot of dollars that exist already and could actually be pooled.
And just sort of a follow-up, are folks finding that municipalities acting as anchor tenants is being accepted more and more by cities?
Yeah, I mean, actually, in all the systems we work with, it's actually a requirement, and it's not a requirement just to make the system work. It's a requirement because it makes common sense. What happens is that the cities gain a tremendous amount of extra bandwidth and the ability to deliver new services that they are currently delivering at a much lower cost. You take patrol cars that are operating with cell cards now at 300 kps, and you take them up to 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 megabits per second. You now have streaming video that can come over. Things that they're doing are, instead of recording traffic stops and then finding out why that officer got shot when things went wrong and analyzing it afterwards, they're actually looking at that traffic stop in real time. Or when an officer in the heat of battle takes off on a high-speed chase, the command and control officer can say, hey, not safe, slow down, stop, because they're actually monitoring what's going on. An Amber Alert, they can go out and a child is missing in the first 20 minutes, the most important time. They can actually distribute a picture of that child in every patrol car and every public safety vehicle in a matter of minutes throughout a city. So there are a lot of internal uses, not that they have to, it's that they want to, but it does indeed also create value for the system.
Great. So we'll take 3 more questions, and I know you guys have been waiting very patiently. Oh, sorry.
I agree that's where you start, and it's very important to define it up front. I mean, we've seen this, but both because there are savings there, also because it defines the system. For example, do you need to cover all the streets? Well, if serving police is part of your goal and part of your revenue stream and part of your means of success, then yes, you do. And if your means is to serve businesses, you really don't care whether you serve the middle of the street where the police car sits. And yeah, we found savings highly uneven across cities, but that is an important place to begin looking.
Sasha?
So we're going to take...
Sasha, there's just a very, very brief rejoinder to this, that there is an alternative to funding it this way, and the Austin model has more in common with the European models than what we've just heard, which is it's not the costs aren't borne by the city or even an operator the city designates. The costs are borne by each node in the network. So if you want to join the network, then you bear the cost of that equipment, and that installation, as we heard, goes on in Vienna and also in Barcelona, and that's the way it works in Austin. And as a result, it's a cooperatively owned network and not a network that's financed by a single payer, so to speak. And as a result, remember I mentioned our Achilles heel in Austin. I was worried about being financially responsible or on the hook for building this network. Well, if you have a 100-node network and each one is responsible for being there with their own checkbooks, when one check bounces, you still have 99 other nodes that are in the network.
I might briefly add to that. Basically, what we tell the users in our networks is to sign a PICO peering agreement. A peering agreement is usually between ISPs, between internet service providers, saying, I will allow traffic to go from my network to your network for free, and vice versa. And we just, tell people, sign that between each other, and you're a mini ISP, just you and your own.
It's like, can I throw out one just quick comment? And this is something, and again, there's no right or wrong way. It depends what the goals of a community are. But particularly if you are going to involve public safety, you have to now start thinking about a utility-grade quality network. It has to be monitored. It has to work. It can't sort of be, well, it's offline for a little bit, that's okay. It has to serve all the time. So the parameters do change a little bit when you're going to start involving public safety. I just wanted to get that out there.
And I want to jump in on this because I think that this is also, talking about these huge figures in terms of, the tens of $millions of dollars in New York City, where they're spending $500 million to build a citywide wireless network for public safety. This is part of the way in which the community gets squeezed out of it, because there are things that cities can do to foster the kind of community level investment, things that people can do for $10 or $100 that people can take on as individuals, and if the city can adopt policies that support and promote that, they can expand internet access to more people in their community without having to issue bonds or generate $500 million.
I'm going to rein in the panel, but I'm going to take one more question. But folks are going to, it's just people have to leave and get back to jobs. But people are going to stick around up here, so you should feel free if you have questions to come up afterwards and talk with the panelists. They're all great folks and love, and I mean love, to get into long discussions on these things. So I'll give you the last question of the day.
Thank you. I almost hate to do this, but I am curious as to what every panelist might say. This has to do with the federal response plan, the federal response framework, Annex 15, public information. To what extent do you see municipal Wi-Fi or wireless being able to serve a public information capacity after a major disaster?
Oh,
I've got a great one on that.
Disaster
Everybody's
response.
got a great.
I got a great example.
I want Sasha to get in on this too.
Sasha first.
We'll be here all afternoon. I can miss my
Well,
staff.
I'll give you a quick story in that when the pilot program for St. Cloud was up in 2004, Hurricane Charlie came through. Florida, went through Punta Gorda, came over to Orlando. Cell phone went down. Electricity went down. The downtown wireless network was the only communication network up and running. It had battery backup. They didn't have electric in the downtown area for about 5 or 6 hours, and it was actually the only system working.
Same experience here. We don't have these hurricanes or anything like that, but sometimes with our main uplink or single uplink actually, some sysadmin makes a mistake. That has the equivalent effect. Yeah? But at that point, we had some experimenter having an extra DSL uplink. So the whole mesh network, which is extremely redundant, really, it looks like, if you look at the network graph, it looks like a spider went totally crazy by doing a web, or totally redundant. So all the traffic went through that DSL uplink. People complained a bit because it was slower, but it still worked. Yeah? So the mesh technology is perfect, just perfect for that.
And I think that this really brings home the importance of community networks. And again, this is something Sasha can speak to, I think, having really worked on this. But the people who respond first to crises, even before first responders respond, are neighbors. And having communication networks that are accessible and controlled by and understood by people in the community is really critical to be able to respond to crises. And in New York, we're talking about, there's a lot of, it's really critical that people have access to the internet in order to prepare for disasters. And, I look at New York and the Office of Emergency Management, and most of their ads tell people to go to their website. So, if you think about a Katrina situation and who's going to get left behind, this is what we're talking about, people who don't have access to the internet. And the systems that they're putting in place, now they have a notify NY thing in place, utilizing cell phones. Again, having access to those communications networks is really critical. But when they had something happen recently, I guess this was national news, the Deutsche Bank building fire in downtown Manhattan, I don't know, but one of the buildings that was damaged during September 11th caught on fire. And the neighborhood actually had all these neighborhood response mechanisms And the like local marshals that were supposed to notify all the buildings, they marshaled up and they showed up on the scene, and the fire department were like, "Who are you?" So in terms of, it's the community engagement is really there, and we need to have communication networks that build on that and really engage that and integrate with offline community networks. If that makes that
Rich
response.
and John?
Important to say both sides of this. On the one hand, it is very hard to build a citywide system that covers every inch with these low-power transmitters that's highly reliable, of the kinds, as you were saying earlier, that public safety requires. One should be careful not to call this a replacement for other systems. On the other hand, it is an outstanding supplement. New Orleans is another example where the Wi-Fi system continued to work after all sorts of things failed around it. And I think, so I'm saying, I would say public safety would be crazy to rely entirely on it, but they would be crazy to ignore it also, and they should use it.
Emergency communications to the public.
Oh, emergency communication to the...
It's
Okay,
exactly
actually.
where it's key.
Take them out to the public.
Right, you can act.
So when Houston was threatened by the hurricane shortly after Katrina, Austin, of course, was a major evacuation site for a city that was many times our size. Because we have a managed network of hotspots with a captive portal, we were immediately able to start advertising volunteer recruitment messages and where to report. The other thing we could do is, again, because we have the email addresses of all of our registered users in the city, we could do an email blast. We opted not to do that at this point, but that's always been an option for the city to do that with us.
Yeah, and I know the St. Cloud system is set up that they can actually push a message out to the entire network that when you log on or click your computer after that has been pushed, that screen comes up first. And it, if you're on that network, you have no choice. It's there, and you can then go past it.
Okay, I'd love to keep this up.
Yes, well, and certainly do keep up the conversation. Come on up here and talk with our panelists. Please thank them with me for doing such a wonderful job today. And thank you for coming. And yeah, definitely, let's keep the conversation going.